All right. We are in a special session, the Montessori Peaks Academy board on what is it, July 7th, 2020 at 6:32 p.m. And Lisa will be here shortly and we'll take notes or take minutes to the extent they're needed. But I think we have a quorum, so we can commence to begin to proceed. All right. As is our tradition in in-person meetings, we'll take note of the mission statement, but not read it. And we'll move on to item number 1, which is to talk about the financing for both the North Campus and the main building. And I will turn it over to Brittany.
Thanks, Jack. And I think Matt was just able to join us. And we're just we're just starting, Matt. Welcome and thanks for attending later in the evening here. So I sent out the report. There's some updates we have, and I'm sure Matt can maybe give us some more real-time updates, but basically one of the issues that the bank offer required was that we do some type of banking with them. And that is not usually we do all our banking with the district. And so Matt had reached out to them to discuss that, and Amy as well in more detail. And that was something they were firm on. So I reached out to our council to see whether we could contact the district about that. And I think Matt will share that in past situations, districts have, or charter schools have been able to do some small banking matters with the bank in order to get the offer and the loan and the financing. And so today they sent over, just a little bit ago, they sent over what I think, but Matt, please correct me, is a little bit like kind of like a debit card account where you use it for, maybe the admin has a card or something and you use it for certain smaller purchases. As long as MPA can agree to that and get district approval for that, they're willing to extend the offer again on the current terms that you all see in the offer and the breakdown that we provided to you. I'll let Matt weigh in on that. But before that, you guys can see Amy, Bryan, and myself met, and we had more than an hour, I think, conversation with Matt, asking a bunch of these questions that we thought everyone would have. And we just put them in the report. And then we talked again after that to see if we could have any recommendations or wanted to provide any recommendations to the board. And so we were all jointly agreeable to that recommendation that I put at the top of the report. So Matt, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. No problem.
Can you weigh in a little bit on the update on your discussions with the bank?
Yeah, so you had a great summary. I think basically what they're looking for is a credit card program through BBVA, and they'll give you some credit for spending through them, and then they want you to have a money market account that will be used to make the payments on that credit card, and that balance is supposed to be at least $10,000 a month, which on average, which is a very minimal amount of money relative to your operations. So those are the two main things. And then I don't really understand what this last thing is, but it's some sort of like fraud protection. I don't know, something that helps with your fraud protection and making sure that there's not someone stealing your account. I think it's just part of all of their accounts, and honestly I don't understand it, but it doesn't seem like, I think it's just something that would come with the other two products, assuming you could get the district's approval to have a credit card through BBVA and to have $10,000 a month at least on hand with them instead of with the district's funds. So it seems like a very reasonable proposal. And we've seen schools like Golden View, for example, before Golden View left the district and went to CSI, they moved all of their money away from the district. So there's precedent for it. And I don't think that's what you guys would want to do anyway, because it sounds from, the conversation we had and from what Amy tells us, there's a lot of positives to what you do with the district, and it really simplifies things and reduces the amount of staff you have to have. So it seems like a reasonable middle ground for what, provides really low cost financing. So Amy, I don't know, what the process looks like from here. I understand that the finance department at Jeffco may be flipping over and changing dramatically in August, is what I just heard.
Yeah, I don't know, but I gave Kathleen Askelson, who's the CFO, a heads up about it, and she said, they'll just have to look at it and make a decision. So I'm thinking, based on, looking at this for a quick few minutes, that they'd probably be okay, but we probably just have to send it to her and Tom and figure that out.
I think,
Okay.
I think from Bill Befke's response that he wasn't, that this wasn't unusual, that he's dealt with this kind of issue before with the district. So I got the impression from his response that it wasn't going to be a hang up, most likely, especially considering it's such a small scale, relationship with the bank and not a substantive one. Matt, could you weigh in on any of the other negotiating things that you were reaching out to the bank with regarding the prepayment, like maybe a term between 7 and 10 years where we could repay or finance without penalty, and those kind of things?
Yeah, unfortunately, basically the bank said, yeah, we're open to discussing all of those items, but we really, there's no point unless we know we can do the other side of this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So they basically punted and said, we can't tell you yet, but we're definitely open to making some changes, and what those ultimately will look like depending on what relationship we can get from the school. So unfortunately, I don't know yet.
Okay, but it was, they didn't just reject it out of hand.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Okay, so if they're open to it and they need to know about this, it's probably likely that that's something that they would strongly consider.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they understand that you have other options, and that, while we're working with them pretty closely to figure out how we could move the money, and they probably get a sense that there's, a good opportunity in this for them if we can figure that out. They know they have other options, and they were open to, looking at some of those things and changing them. I'm not sure, at what level, but we talked about the rate reset possibility rather than having to refinance. We talked about lowering the rates. We talked about that prepayment, opportunity sometime before the final year, so that you have time to refinance if you want to or need to. We talked about reducing the debt service coverage ratio and the days cash on hand. So all those things were discussed, and they didn't say no to any of them in the initial conversation.
Okay, and then the one thing else, Brian, I wasn't sure if Brian and Amy, but one of the questions we had coming out of our discussions was whether we had to use all these funds as a bank placement, whether we had to use them within a certain time frame. And Matt was so great in getting back to me quickly today, in that, yeah, we do have to use the funds within 3 years, but we don't have to, there might be the possibility of a structured withdrawal. So we don't need to take out all the funds in the first right away. We could take out maybe a small bucket of funds that we reserve at the end of the 3rd year, right up against that timeline. But it is a 3-year limit on that.
Thanks for doing that research.
Yeah, no, I'm glad Matt could get back. Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to open it up to anybody else to ask questions on the report, or ask Matt or Amy or anybody else.
The only thing I would add with that 3 years is basically at closing, what bond counsel will be looking for is for you to have a reasonable expectation that the money you could draw down over 3 years, you expect to spend within 3 years. And if you don't, it's not necessarily a big deal. You have to do some additional paperwork with the IRS and explain what happened, but there's not necessarily a penalty involved with it or anything. It's just, you want to be expecting that you're going to spend it within 3 years. And that's something you have to sign on the dotted line saying when you close. So 3 years for 10 years.
I don't think there's going to be any shortage of what we could spend the money on, or say that we need it to spend the money. So okay, I think we're good. I think we're good there.
Good.
So I'm open it up to everybody to ask Matt or whoever any questions you might have.
Well, Brittany, before we get there, could you just kind of give the high level overview? I mean, what you provided was great, but just kind of an overview and what the recommendation of the Brain Trust was.
Sure, absolutely. So there were several options, but when we went through it, the best option looked like the 10-year fixed rate option for the bank placement. The public bond option was a much higher interest rate. And although it would give us a locked in rate for, the 25 or 30 years, I can't remember, it was not going to allow us to do a lot of the things that we thought we need to get done, and the flexibility with the lower interest rate. So the bank play also, the bond option, the public bond option requires us to put reserves into an account. So if you look at the paperwork, you can see that right now we have about $520 some thousand that we have been paying into a reserve on our current bonds because they are a public bond option. With the bank option, we don't have to do that, which means we can use that money. We don't have to just have it set there. The 10-year option was a good rate. After talking with Matt, we kind of got the information that about every 8.5 years, charter schools they need to refinance, they need to borrow new money because there's always projects that need to be done on their buildings. And so the 7-year one means we only would lock that interest rate in for 7 years. And then after 7 years, we'd have to say, well, what is the current interest rate? We'd have to refinance, and it might be much higher than it is now. It might not be, but it's pretty low right now. So the chance that after 7 years, it might still be this low is, you can all, decide what you feel about that. But so the 10-year mark kind of allowed us to get the best out of the longest time out of this low interest rate. And then we were really hoping that we could negotiate that during that 7 to 10 year period, we wouldn't have a penalty for if we needed to refinance and borrow new money, that we wouldn't have a penalty. And so that's one thing that's yet to be seen. But I know it was a big part of our discussions that, well, should we do 7 or 10 years? I know there was some comments about 7 years goes really fast. And if you consider all we're taking on and the projects we're taking on, 7 years probably is a real fast. So 10 years seemed like a good recommendation. The amount of, I didn't see anything that wasn't favorable in the bank terms, except for the things that we've identified that Matt's gonna still go back to the bank and discuss on. Our payment is extremely low. And because it was even lower than we expected, I think our numbers last April when we got the last numbers were about 3.74%, and this is 2.83%. So it's almost an entire percentage lower than what we had planned for. And because of that, it freed up a greater borrowing capacity for us, but still maintain a reduced mortgage payment and a debt payment at the end of the year, which would still give Brian and Amy that cushion that they really need. And so during our discussions, we kind of talked about, well, what could we do with that 3 million versus 2.5 or 2 million, which we had been discussing previously. And so I reached out to DCS to find out what that would really mean. And without having line items, it would be significant, considering the proposal on the table is to keep the building closed for next year, allow Brian and the school the time they need to develop a program, and in the meantime, just build the middle school instead of delaying and trying to piecemeal it, patch it up so it's available in the fall, which I don't even think is really possible anymore. And since if that's kind of the direction we're going in, to be able to do what we need on the existing building and on the new building and do it well, that 3 million would open up a lot more flexibility, not like, a huge margin, but it would allow us to do some things that we might really feel are essential, which we're not going to be able to afford with 2 million. And I know Brian and Amy had identified some things that need to be done on the building, probably in 3 to 5 years, like a new roof on our existing building. And so this funds will allow us to put some money away, or reserve some money for that for those improvements that we're not going to be able to save because we know that the PPR is going to remain low for the next couple of years at least. So it's going to be hard for us to save money. And so this would allow us to still meet the current building's needs without impacting our budget further. So I think that's kind of a high level, maybe not as high as you wanted, Jack, sorry.
It was perfect. Thank you. Questions, concerns, issues, thoughts?
So is our vote today kind of contingent on getting those answers around repayment? Because I think that's the biggest fear is, you know, we hit the 10-year mark, we go into a variable rate for the next 15 years of the term.
Well, we can always refinance after 10 years. That's a guarantee. We have, to. I mean, we have to do it then. The issue is if we needed to do it sooner, would we pay a penalty? Like paying off your mortgage sooner than, you know, you're expected, is your bank going to penalize you? So I think that was, you know, if that's the case, then we wouldn't be able to, I don't know, Matt, would we be able to take out more money and just not refinance? Or would we be prohibited from doing any type of additional projects with additional money?
Yeah, you would have to pay the penalty to them in order to get out and do additional debt or refinance if they don't give you some window of, you know, where you can prepay at no cost.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
the
Becky,
way I was reading it was a 25-year term. It was a guaranteed rate for the first 10, but it's not a.
It's a 10-year balloon. So it's a 10-year commitment with a 25-year AM. And going back,
Okay.
and Brittany had a good idea to see if we could get an opportunity to renew so that we wouldn't have to do a whole new deal. But if the terms were to you all and, you know, the bank was still interested in that, we could roll it forward. So I put that out there. I don't know if they'll accept that or not, but that would make it a little bit more efficient and you know, maybe possible. You know, you still may want to refinance at that point because you might find a better deal or whatever it may be, but at least then you have, you know, some opportunity to keep it there, keep it alive. So we'll see what they say on that. But otherwise, yeah, you would have to refinance at that 10-year.
And to your point, Becky, I think that there are two possible ways that we could approach this, or at least one is to agree tonight on kind of the amount and the general parameters and let Brittany and Brian and Amy and Matt kind of go forth and conquer, assuming that nothing dramatically changes. Or we can kind of defer, say, keep going and come back to us with kind of the final, both of which are perfectly acceptable ways to go, depending on kind of what people's comfort level is at this point.
I think one thing to add to that, Jack, is that from Matt's perspective, he doesn't really want to approach the bank about, right now we're approved for 2.5 million. We're asking for 3, but if the board's not comfortable with that, then it makes no sense for him to push the bank on giving 3, even though they said they would be okay with that. But it's no use revamping an offer because they'd have to make a whole new offer and new paperwork and all that stuff like that if the board's not comfortable with that. So that's the only caveat I put in there.
Right. So we'll want to have a consensus on the amount tonight, whether or not we agree to kind of go forward or want to come back and see the final terms.
Well, just to add to Brittany's, we were thinking 3 mil. Partly if we are able to, and Matt answered the question, we got 3 years to kind of spend our money, but what we can do is after our first 2, now we're 2 years in.
Did anybody else lose him?
The 2-3 years gives us time to assess what's wrong and use that last bit of the loan money to fix the building for the next 7 years.
Yeah, I think I caught the gist of it.
So, Brittany, one quick question. Is there any reason not to do this? It seems like a no-brainer to me. Um, my brain is fried after a long day, so just my own sense of things. It seems like there isn't a bad reason to say yes.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I 100% agree.
Okay.
Yeah, and I concur completely.
Okay.
I don't see any reason why we would hamstring ourselves, given or potentially hamstring ourselves given the amount of difference in the rates and everything.
I mean, we
Okay.
know that we're going to have a lot of capital needs, and we know that if we want to get this middle school off the ground, we have to fund it. We have to actually get it to where we can use it, and that it's in a condition that our community will want to use. And you know, that with the rate so low, now is the time to take out the money, even considering the situation that we're in. That's my opinion. That it's not gonna. There won't be a better time to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I just, you guys have been a lot closer, and you guys are lawyers, so I know you can argue either side, totally freely and flexibly. Um, so I just wanted to ask, because I don't see another side. Usually I can see another side, but I don't even see it, and that's a warning flag for me, you know. But it sounds like there really isn't another side. So,
Other than just simply, you know, the fact of the matter is you're 500,000 more in debt,
Right.
or you know whatever the number is.
right, but we're not going to go into debt if we don't want to do it.
Right.
So, yeah, okay. I'm comfortable.
More questions? Questions for Matt?
If there's not questions for Matt, maybe we can let him go. But
Be
Matt,
free and fly.
Matt, is there anything else that we forgot to add or that you think it's important for us to consider?
No, I think you just explained that really well. It was a good job. I know I gave you a lot of information. You summarized it well. I think to your point, you know, you have an expectation they're going to spend the $3 million, but if you don't, and you just decide you don't want to draw those funds down, then, you know, you don't have to. So it's not like I think, you know, Brandon basically just said that you don't have to do it. And if you don't want to, you won't. And so I agree. The bank seems very open to approving the additional amount. And since we're already asking them to readdress other points, it's a good opportunity to bring this to them. The only other thing I'll say is that, you know, you guys are kind of giving us some direction tonight about what to do or not do. But ultimately, we have a special board meeting when we get near closing to approve the ultimate transaction with all the details and the documents. And, you know, if you want to read thousands of pages, hundreds of pages of legal documents, you'll be able to do that. So you're giving us kind of a green light on which way to go. But we will be coming back to you for ultimately an approval of the transaction once it's all, you know, agreed upon and documented.
Matt, I would also add that I would hope that we could reach a consensus tonight, because I'm really holding back the design and build team, and we gave them a firm date of August 1st of next fall that school has to be open and operational. Like, that is a line in the sand, we told them. And that means we got to get to work. And so the longer they're just keep telling, well, we can't do anything until we have a budget. You guys got to give us your dollar amount budget. And so I just put that out there. I don't want to not to put any pressure on anybody, but I'm just hoping that we at least can get some kind of consensus of what I should tell them, what direction we should move.
If we do say the 3 million, do we have a set amount that we want to be that reserve amount for?
That was the next question. that was the next question. I had reached out to DA Davidson, and Amy and Brian and I had talked about it, and we had thought to present something like 3 buckets: a bucket for the north building, a bucket for the main building, and then a smaller bucket with this kind of like reserve fund. Obviously, the contingencies will be built into both of those as well, but to give to DCS to say confidentially, kind of give it to them. Here's what our numbers are. And John responded to that. He said that was a reasonable and sensible approach. And he thought that it would be great if the board could give that information, and then they could come into our strategic plan at the end of July with some concrete light items, hopefully, and some discussion where then we could pick and choose some things and smooth those things around and see what effect it would have on each building. If we spend 200,000 more over here, we can get this, but we won't get this, or vice versa. And so, but they can't really, I was really pushing them to try to have that information now, but it's just not the way it works, unfortunately. So they need us to decide the big number first, and kind of if we're comfortable with those 3 kind of buckets.
So
Brian,
my thought. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Brian, does that echo what we talked about, you and Amy and I?
That's correct. I think it's real important to figure out the cost of the North Campus, or decide as a board what's your allocation. And we can back into the main campus and then what we want to pull off in reserve.
So I had proposed to DCS, if we could agree to the 3 million, well, we actually have 3.2 million because we have some of the 5B funds that are still left over. So it's about 3.2 billion if we go with, or million, if we go with the 3 million.
It's gonna be a good campus.
I know, right? I proposed something like 1.6 to the middle school, to the north building, 1.2 to the main building, and then that would leave about $500,000 left over as a middle bucket or a contingency bucket. And I did that based upon we had a design and build team meeting last week with everybody. Brian was there, Amy participated. And based upon those discussions and kind of what it looked like we might be able to do with that building, which, by the way, I'm excited to share it at the end of July because it's pretty awesome. I think 1.5 it's going to be tight, but it's not unimaginable. And that still leaves a big, significant amount of money. I think for 1.2, we could get quite a bit of what we need at the main building that we needed done.
I agree. Well said.
Brittany, Brian, and Amy, this is Lisa. I hope you can hear me. Sorry, I had to dial in late. But do you feel the $500K in reserve is adequate?
Truthfully, I think that's going to get spent. But it might not be spent right away. But for maybe the new roof on the existing building, not the church, not the north building, but the school building. Brian, there's some things there. Realistically, my thoughts are that plan for the worst case scenario, but the best case scenario would be like our middle school after 2 years is great. Families now want to stay at MPA. There's more demand for the upper L kids, and we need those extra classrooms we have kind of used for other things. We have not expanded the space of our elementary building at all. So how are we going to accommodate the need for more space in our elementary building? And we just don't have the funds to do that. Like we can't take out any funds right now to do that. And that's going to have to be something that is going to have to be addressed if it happens in like year, 7. Right. I think I don't have any other way. I've been racking my brain for a week to try to find some magical solution to that. And I just can't see any way that we could expand the space besides the outdoor education, the playground, the fences, all of that stuff, the security that we really need, new carpeting and stuff like that, HVAC systems, all of that, yes. but I don't see how we
Okay.
could build classrooms for that. And so,
Sure. Okay.
Well, if we're doing the HVAC and some of those improvement things and not just focused on new build, then it sounds like a lot of the current infrastructure challenges with the current school are going to get addressed. So maybe there's not as big of a need in the next 7 years to do some modifications to the current school for bringing it up where it needs to be.
and we will have those extra space in the middle school building. So if, for instance, there's a music program, or if, for instance, there's a need for more some counseling or private spaces for parents to meet, it would be possible to use those spaces that we don't currently have, in our existing building. Like we have one conference room and it's never available because there's so much need for it. So I think that there might be some, and Brian would know better than that, how to squeeze everything out of every resource that you have. I'm not as experienced in the principal world as doing that. So
Now, the main campus at MPA is a solid campus. It just needs a refresh. Anything that we know is going to expire in the next 5 to 10 years, we just need to be proactive. But the building's been maintained, and I don't think there's huge worries on it. It's just, it needs money. It needs $1 million put into it. It needs fencing. It needs better security. COVID's going to be here for a while. So the next 2-3 years are going to be real iffy on what's going to happen in the world, and really expanding our elementary program. We just need to fill our elementary program right now. So I think the direction that you are on as a board, with offering some stabilization to the school by offering the North Campus and expanding the homeschool, expanding the middle school, I still think you're on target. That to me is the stabilization factor for the next 5 to 10 years.
All right, do we want to go ahead and let Matt go then? You're free.
All right, thanks, Jack. Just for what it's worth, this is crazy. So we've done about 260 charter school financings since 1998, and this is the lowest rate I've ever seen for a charter school bond deal. And yeah, it's not to term, but many of the others weren't as well, and it's just crazy. I mean, bad environment and COVID and all that, but on the other side, some really good things that are happening for you guys in the midst of all this. So I think it makes a lot of sense to try and get as much out of it as you can. So it's exciting, and it proves the good work you guys are doing. So have a good night, and let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll be working away to try and improve the terms with the bank.
Thanks,
you,
Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you,
All right,
Matt.
bye.
Appreciate it.
So here's what I'd recommend, and then let everybody can chime in on whether it's a good idea or not. I think that we'd ought to approve the 3 million and allow Matt and Brittany and Brian and Amy to go back to the bank with the 3 million, give them whatever additional authority or continuing authority they need for purposes of continuing to document the loan on the terms that we've talked about. But I do think that having even a really short special meeting to bless the final is a good thing. And so I don't even know maybe we just vote on the authorization for the 3 million and to again pursue things, and that way then we can come back and if Brittany and Matt say here are the terms and it's what we've talked about, then it can be a super short meeting and we just approve it and move forward.
Makes sense to me.
what does everybody think about the three? Well, if we're, what does everybody think about the concept of the 3 buckets?
Yeah.
Maybe it's 100,000 here difference or whatever, but the concept of the 3 buckets, if I can kind of give DCS that guidance, then I think they can do some work between now and our retreat. That would be helpful to us in our discussions. And if we kind of have a consensus on that, it's not a vote or anything, but if we kind of have a consensus and I can kind of give them that direction, it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I don't see anybody shaking their head or sticking out their tongue or anything, so I think we're good.
Okay.
Does anybody want to make a motion with respect to the 3 million? Brittany, do you think we need to, or do you want to just? I'd feel better about giving Matt the clear direction that we've approved them to go back to the board or to the bank with 3 million.
Right. So okay, I'll move since I'm led the. I move that we grant approval for borrowing for the terms that BBVA presented to us, subject to some negotiation, for the maximum amount of $3 million.
Second.
I can do a roll call. Brittany Horstman,
Yes.
Zach Llewellyn,
Yes.
Becky Springstead,
Yes.
Brandon Smith,
Yes.
Lisa Myers, yes. Christina Grant,
Yes.
Beth McDonald.
Is not here.
Okay, sorry, I missed that part.
No problem.
Is Carmen here?
I am here and I say yes.
All right, thank you. And then Robin?
Yes.
All right. And that would be the motion passes.
Okay. Anything else we need to talk about on financing, Brittany?
Nope.
And this may be out of order. I didn't pull the agenda up. Anything else you want to talk about on due diligence?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think, Becky had a good question that was raised about the capacity for, initially the capacity for students, for the middle school students, whether that's enough space. After our last meeting with the architects, I don't see any problem with us getting 100 homeschoolers and 120 middle schoolers, or some, combination of that. That's about 220 students. I think the biggest Montessori middle school is like, I don't know, a fourth of that or a third of that. So I think that we have a lot of room to grow. The meeting was, Brian, I don't know if you have comments, but I think the meeting was extremely productive, and I was really excited about what we might be able to do with that building. And so I think it's going to fit our needs wonderfully. So I wanted to provide an update on that, because I know it was a concern of mine too, that we'd be able to use it for the purpose. But Jack, you have also updates on that.
Yeah. So I won't bore you with all the details, but let's just say that dealing with Jeffco zoning, when they only work 4 days a week and you can't show up and talk to them, is a lot of fun. But we finally got it worked out today, where the short version is they kept wanting us to do like a lighting plan for outside, and a whole bunch of other things. Finally got it worked out today that we don't have to do that. We've been able to truncate a lot of things. As a result, I think we will be able to have the application ready to go Monday or Tuesday of next week. Brian, I'll need to check in with you at one point, because the biggest issue that is going to be remaining is kind of a traffic analysis. But again, given the location and everything, I'm not worried about it. They're not worried about it. It's just more talking about how many we're expecting and when and stuff. And so you and I can work through that. And Lisa previously had agreed to kind of put everything into a nice, pretty package. So my hope is that we can have the application finished beginning of next week, and then you give it to Lisa to make look pretty and stuff, and shoot it over to them sometime next week. There has to be a public hearing, which again is a little bit interesting now because they don't, it's virtual and everything, and it has to be within 30 days. So everybody keep in mind that that may affect our closing date just a smidge, but we won't know that for sure until we get it in, and we should know for sure what that's going to look like in time for the board retreat. So I'll send out periodic updates and let everybody know kind of where we're at and what we need to do at the hearing, if anything. But that's a huge relief, because some of the stuff they were asking for was like thousands of dollars and weeks of time, and we just didn't want to do it. So, any questions on that?
Now, did we get the appraisal back yet?
We don't have to do an appraisal.
Oh, the district wanted one. I thought we were doing a small one, no?
Let's talk offline. We may have something good enough for them.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, because our appraiser kind of got started before the bank told us we didn't need him. So he may have already given us enough that will get us there. So I'll get that to you and we can talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, do we want to move on to the calendar?
Sounds good. I'm going to turn my video off so you can hear me better. Jeffco officially has moved their start date to August 24th. So I called Tom McMillan and said, well, if we change our start date to match the district, which I've gotten feedback from parents and staff members that would be best to get everybody in alignment, just because so many of our families also have students in other schools, and give us a few days to kind of get things worked out in the era of COVID. So sounds like we can be under Jeffco's waiver. So if we align our calendar with Jeffco, they will do the waiver process for us. So the calendar I put is like it's called a late start calendar. So it just simply takes the 19th, moves it to the 24th. I put in 3 days for testing, which we are only going to have one. So that gives us time to test anything that we want to test as a school, since we lost all those opportunities back in April and May. It's also meet and greets. Teachers could run some small groups if we wanted, just so they get the feel of a room. So there's lots of flexibility in those 3 days, the 19th through the 21st. I did put down starting just kinders on the 21st and preschool starting the 25th. So I did not get a chance to run that by Robin. So Robin, why don't you weigh in on that part?
Yeah, I think that's typically those phase-in days are really what we need in primary.
Okay. Well, the ones we've had in the past is, so like new kindergartners would be a different day than existing, 4-year-olds who are now a 5-year-old who've been in our campus, but we don't really have that luxury this year if we're going to start on the 24th. So do you think that's still reasonable, Robin? Just new kinders and existing kiddos from MPA? I mean, it'll be 10 in primary per room, roughly.
Yeah, that would be fine. Typically the hardest part is that we are just trying that first day to get them just comfortable with where their spaces and all that kind of stuff. So I don't see that would be any problem. It would be easier with all new students and all returning students, but
okay.
Yeah.
The only thing that would do is just push things down the week. So one more day. But
could you do just all new primary students, so 3s, 4s, or kinders, and then returning primary students, 3s, 4s, and kinders? Or is there a reason kinders need to start alone?
Was that directed at me?
Probably
Or really anyone. Really anyone.
No, it's really just that our newer students don't know any of this schedule or the protocol
Right.
or where to put their things away. And they usually cry a lot. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of challenging to maneuver all of that with, older students. But I've done it both ways. I've done half and half. I've had kinders there on those days.
Right.
I think from primary, our perspective is we just need to mitigate the fact that we're going to have a lot of new students.
Yeah, and you have some flexibility, and I don't think we have to put this strictly in the calendar, but you have some flexibility. And if you did your kinder testing, earlier around the 19th, you could take the 21st and do new students. We don't have to put it on the calendar, but you could do some small introductory groups. They don't have to go all day, things like that. These extra days give us some possibilities of getting kids used to maybe this different school climate.
So that being said, Brian, I saw the calendar today, and I think that, these are really great questions, and the board, I would really like to go back to my department and, talk to them about it. And it sounds like nothing is completely set in stone other than just needing those 2 days for just that, the kindergarten and preschool, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So if I could defer to my team and get back to you about how they would like to structure having all kindergarten and all preschool, I would really appreciate that, because I don't feel comfortable speaking to that totally.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that all we need to do is to say the start date is going to be date X. You
Right.
guys figure out how you want to deal with it from there.
Exactly.
Okay. And if that's the case, is there anybody who thinks that starting on the 24th with the Jeffco calendar and being coordinated, again, subject to what we've said, isn't a good idea?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I think if we can align with Jeffco on a start date in this environment, I think that's wise.
Then would you like to make the motion?
I would love to. Sorry, I'm getting my vote ready here on my piece of paper in my car. All right, I move that we adopt the later start calendar with a start date of August 24th for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Okay. All right, Brittany Horstman,
Yes.
Jack Llewellyn,
Yes.
Becky Springstead,
Yes.
Brandon Smith,
Yes.
Lisa Myers, yes. Christina Grant,
Yes.
Carmen Center,
Yes.
and Robin Morrissey.
Yes.
All right. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. And then the last thing on the agenda was, and I put it in caps, a brief discussion about the strategic retreat, and Lisa sent out the draft agenda, which looks great. One thing I wanted to ask is to make sure that early on, when it's just the board, I think it's because we've got some new members and maybe some new input or thoughts. I'd like to take a few minutes and go back over kind of the thought process of how we ended up with we'd ought to have a middle school and how that relates to the purchase of the North Campus, so that if anybody has some legitimate concerns about whether that's the right path or the reasons for it, we can all talk about it while we're together and things. So Christina and Lisa, would there be a way to kind of build that into the discussion early on?
I think the very first topic could easily encompass that. Wanted to confirm that our current vision, mission, and principles, which were built off of that original data, still align and would encompass what we want to do with middle school. So we could just give a little extra background and include that, I think.
Okay, I think that'd be great. I don't necessarily expect a wide deviation from where we are, but I do think making sure that everybody's kind of operating with the same information and everybody has an opportunity to ask some of the fundamental questions is kind of important as we go forward, because there's going to be a lot of work involved and a lot of issues involved going forward, and making sure that everybody's kind of on the same page and all to use a bad metaphor, everybody rowing in the same direction will be helpful.
I am about the schedule. So at our last meeting, I don't know how you guys want to handle this, but maybe we can talk offline. I just want to put it out there. DCS and HCM said that they were willing to attend. What they were hoping to do is they were hoping to have, with this direction that we kind of give them now, they were hoping that they could come, well, I was pushing them to come to the retreat with some more detailed analysis of costs, some cost modeling, so we could have some idea of, first of all, the design from HCM, some of the, taking the information that has already been given to them and then putting some ideas for us to kind of facilitate our conversations about what might be possible. And then at the same time, having some dollar amounts associated with those possibilities so that we can know what's realistic and what's not. I was really pushing them to have that. So DCS says they can be there Friday night. Seth from NCMPS can be there Friday night. I think Beth can be there Friday night, which is all people with middle school experience and development kind of experience in that realm. And then we have the design, and then we have the dollar amounts, but DCS can only be there on Friday. So, and I haven't heard back from HCM, but I'm assuming that they might be able to do Friday as well instead of Saturdays.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there's a way, it's a little bit, I'm trying to kind of balance some scheduling things.
Well, if there's any other input around some of that was a high level draft agenda. If there's any other input on the chunks of time and what we would cover, if not, Brittany, maybe we can go offline and talk about how to arrange it based on folks' time. The only question is probably, so Mr. Brian, Seth was available Friday night as well. Everybody wants to happy hour with the MPA board apparently on a Friday night. Love it. And I think we were looking at Seth from 6 to 8.
Correct.
Okay. So is there any other input on any of the other chunks of the agenda as it stands right now? If not, I can work with Brittany offline. We can see about just rearranging the time and still try to hold the flow of the information to meet the goals.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay. All right, Brittany.
I think also we haven't.
Oops, sorry, Lisa.
Sorry. No, you're fine. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, are we comfortable just moving forward with the virtual meeting? I don't know if we've decided on that, or I know it's a long. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
At this point, that is my still my working assumption. Talked about it a little bit with a couple of folks, and if we're doing the physical distancing or mask wearing, in person type of thing, it's going to really, I think, hinder the conversation anyway. I think we've got a good working, way with Zoom at this point, and there are some virtual tools that I think we can use to facilitate some of the conversation. So unless something sort of drastically changes or I can't figure out a decent way or a solid way to facilitate some of those chunks, I think my assumption is virtual.
I would add a counter position there. Last week with Brian and Amy in the art room, we had a meeting of, I think it was about 8 or 9 people. We had social distancing, we had masks on. When you're talking about designing a building and when you're looking at, oh, draw this here, what if we move this wall here? Or what if we added stairs here? Or what would this look like? It's really, really hard to have those kind of discussions virtually. And I would weigh on the other side where I really think that regardless of whether we all have masks on, the ability to physically be in the same room and pass notes or pass drawings or pass ideas around is really essential. So
I think you guys should be able to give everybody the choice on what they should do, and we should try to accommodate those who want to be offline. I could hear you guys in the meeting on Friday pretty good. It was hard without the documents. So as long as they have documents, maybe we can purchase one of those speakers that Valerie had. But I think kind of a time where we still need to let people have their option.
I agree with that too. I agree with that too, Amy.
Yeah.
So just to do a counterpoint on that one, live streaming becomes difficult if it's either, so if everybody's on Zoom, that's easy. And if everybody's in person, that's easy. When you have a combination of Zoom and in person, that's where.
But we don't live stream working sessions. We've never, our last retreat stuff, we don't record it, or it's a working session. So it's not.
Okay, so there will be no live stream for that.
Yeah, I would, that's more like a working session. So the only reason that we live stream it is because we're virtual and it needs to be a public and open meeting. And that's why, I mean, that's not the only reason we like it. We like it because it facilitates better engagement. But the reason why.
Well, we would still need to, for a working session, be public though, right?
Right. But if we're meeting physically, we have a physical building and that would be the public nature of the.
Right.
Of
But
the
if we have anybody who would want to be virtual, which I can maybe send something out and get input from the invitees to see what that looks like. Whether it's the live streaming or not, one of my experience is that you're either all in person or you're all virtual. The person on the phone is in a large group setting. The people on the phone are never going to have the same voice at the table, if you will, that you would with the folks who are in the room. The folks in the room are just going to, right, you can't see the person on the phone trying to talk. So I think that would be a very difficult thing to facilitate a partially physical, partially virtual thing. So
Here's the other question. So let's assume for the sake of argument that we notice this and 50 parents want to come to the meeting. Which we all know is never going to happen, but
right.
Even if it's 10, do we end up in a situation where we've got issues with size and everything else, and I think we always have to be prepared for that, just in case.
That is also true.
So live streaming, if we're all in the same room, I have the equipment for that.
And we could use the gym. I mean, the gym's not under any type of maintenance or anything that would prevent us from using that. Amy or Brian?
No, we just got to be careful not to scratch the floors all up with tables and chairs before school starts.
Okay, well, it sounds like the starting point is I can do kind of a maybe an email thing out to the invitees, which I need to confirm as well, and see what comfort level the entire invitee list has, because I think we do need to honor the need for virtual. I'll also look at what facilitation techniques virtually and then try to wrap that up with something in the very near future, so we know what we're dealing with. Timing wise, I think we know the times at least, and I think it'll be whether we're sitting at our computers or whether we're somewhere physical.
And I think it's probably a good thing, not just our invitees, but if our board, if there's a consensus on our board one way or the other, if the consensus is we should do it virtually, then we don't need to really reach out to the invitees because they'll presumably be okay with virtually, but the issue is whether they'd be okay with in person. So if I have no idea where there's a consensus on our board right now about that. So maybe that would be good to know.
I would like to do the in-person. I also have not had an opportunity to view the North Campus at all. So I would really love an opportunity to see the North Campus before we start our conversations about it too.
That's a good point, Becky. And I can help. I can arrange that. If I'll put you in touch with John, whoever's going to be in the building next. And I also asked HCM and DCS to give us drawings. They're going to put together a kind of a conceptual design of the building of both floors and have that to us a couple days before our retreat. So everyone will have some time to review some visuals. But yeah, I'll reach out to you tomorrow and we'll get that scheduled.
Thank you. And I'm assuming Carmen's in the same boat. I don't know that Carmen's seen this space either.
Yeah, I have not seen the space yet.
I have not either, which would be interesting, but in terms of consensus, I likely have childcare challenges, so that is another thing. I don't have a grandparent backup option at this point.
All right. So.
Okay, I can reach out to folks. I'll start with the board, and Mr. Bryan would like to touch base with you about kind of the other attendees, if we're, Beth and if we're having some other teacher input, and then we can see kind of what the consensus there might look like, and even how many folks,
Yeah, I at the time I scheduled that, it was all virtual at that point. So those people are under the assumption it's virtual right now. So, yeah.
Right.
And I think we're going to have to be in a situation where if for all the reasons we talked about, if it's half and half, it's not going to work well. And so we almost have to defer if somebody or a couple somebodies really don't want it to be in person. And we could do tours and stuff separately, but I do think it's problematic, and we cause Brandon too many headaches if we have it half and half.
Yeah, and the child care issue isn't also an issue, but we're meeting on the July 24th and 25th. In like 3 weeks, our kids are going to be going to school, and everyone's going to be in the building with 300 kids. So in 3 weeks after that, so but the child care issue is something different as well. So that's.
And I can figure it out, Jack. I'm capable. It's just I have to think it through.
I think that's part of it too is thinking through. I don't know that facilitating that would be as again, the folks who are going to be virtual are not going to have the same voice at the table. It's a very frustrating experience to be that person on the phone.
Well, to me, the way the agenda is written, most of it is virtual. I think the hard part is when we get in deep into design elements with HCM. It's like what Amy said, we have to front load that. So if you could front load it with a visit to the church, you could front load it with a time to review the architectural draft plans. Then when you're sitting in a Zoom, it starts to make sense. So if we did that that week of before the 24th, I don't see why we can't all be virtual then.
And Robin, did you have a chance to see the building?
Yeah, we've been in there for lockdowns, and I'm going to be over doing a walkthrough with Brian tomorrow. So
Okay. So yeah, I think that's a good idea, Brian. I'm absolutely can make that happen. I can send out an email to Carmen and Becky and DCS and see if we can make a, and whoever else might want to get in, if they're comfortable getting in. And if there's a time that's better for some people, let me know with childcare or with work issues, and I can try to coordinate that time so that everyone can have that experience.
Yeah, and the church has been super accommodating. So.
Yep.
Well, why don't?
Yeah, so I'm thinking I can look at the facilitation piece, Brandon. We can talk about whether, if necessary, if it were some kind of hybrid. I need to talk to Brittany. We need to chat anyway about reworking the agenda. Maybe we can work in, Brian, your idea in terms of maybe front loading some stuff. And I can take all those things and throw them into the martini shaker and see what comes out.
Shake away.
Right.
Shake,
it sounds
not drink.
like it sounds like the content of the agenda, the items that are on there are good to go though. So that was one of the main questions.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And I know that there'll be, everyone can kind of expect a packet of information. I mean, from the design team, there'll be information, there'll be cost stuff. But in addition to that, I know Christina and Lisa worked on a survey that went out. So there'll be results for that. So there'll be data for us I'm trying to get some enrollment data, trends from the district, so we can factor that into our discussion. So I know we're gonna have some meaty stuff to review before the day, which might help that front loading a little bit.
Yeah, as you're looking at your calendar, anything you can do to block, I'm hoping to get the survey data should come back a week before. That'll give us a few days, and then to try and give you guys at least 3 or 4 days to have anything that we can put together and send out in advance. Always, helpful. So I've tried to block my calendar in preparation to, do that thinking as much as possible to front load. So if that's an option for folks, it'll just help us get through the conversations as quickly and efficiently as possible.
That works.
Okay. That was the last agenda item. Anybody else have anything we need to talk about?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Last minute. I forgot. DCS would like us, if someone could authorize Jack or myself or whatever, to author a letter saying that that the district can proceed with the contract, developing the contract with Franz and Pittman. They just need some kind of documentation because we never had a vote, because we're not voting on a contract because it goes to the district. They need something like officially on a letterhead. Valerie from DCS asked that it be, if it could be on our letterhead, just stating that we intend to proceed with Franz and Pittman as the contractor.
You want to just do that as the treasurer?
Yeah, if everyone's comfortable with that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have updated letterhead, Brittany, with Robin added in. I'll forward it to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, do we have a motion?
A move, we adjourn.
Can't do it anymore.
I don't know.
Hey, thanks everybody. This was efficient, and appreciate you taking time out of your evening.
Good to see everyone.